Here's the other thing. I think the greatest challenge in government is trust. Both building trust, right, maintaining trust, and also granting, right, or giving trust. The community doesn't trust. It's just an inherent nature of the beast. I just don't think the community, due to a variety of factors, trusts the information that they receive.
Yeah.
Right? And
that was true even back then. I'm super true now.
Absolutely.
It was true back then.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you can say these things are happening and go, we don't believe you. Or they'll say, there's money available.
Yeah. Fix there's something you're not telling us.
The common refrain is, the state's got it. Just because they just think there's an empty pot, an empty bucket filled with money that just pours out and covers any issues.
Kevin, thanks for joining on
Thanks for having me.
episode 5. So Kevin Smith, Deputy Treasurer for the state of Michigan.
Yes, sir.
You've got a long career, not too long, but you got a long career working in state and local finance, going all the way back to Miller Canfield as a bond attorney.
Yeah.
You've done a bunch of stuff as an emergency manager with Detroit Public Schools, Highland Park, and now more recently with the state. So really appreciate you taking time to join us. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
So talk to us. I mean, Detroit guy, grew up, went to Renaissance, MSU, law school, Wayne?
Law school, Wayne. Law school was kind of an afterthought for me. I got a job at Ford Motor Company. They actually relocated me to Dallas, Texas, and then Chicago. I was on the FCGP, management program.
Yeah, rotational.
Rotational program, yeah. So one night, I think I was on hour 16 of my shift. And I said, I've always wanted to go to law school. And I remember I decided, I picked up the phone, I called my dad, and I said, if I'm going to work this hard, I want to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to law school.
Yeah.
So he's like, great. How much money do you have? And at the time, I said, I've got $3,000. He said, to your name?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it was a last minute scramble, and I decided at Wayne State, which gave me some money, and I had the comfort of being able to move back home. Awesome. It was the right choice for me, so I ended up back in Michigan. Yeah.
And what was did you go to Miller Canfield out of law school?
So I clerked for Sixth Circuit, U.S. Court of Appeals.
Yep.
Did a year with Judge Damon Keith.
Yep.
And then immediately after that, went into Miller Canfield.
Yeah, and there was some quote that I saw that he kind of said something that you were like high-powered, put you up there with the former governor. Yeah, put you up there with the former governor of Michigan. He said like you were.
I don't know, man. I learned a lot with Judge, and he was a mentor, a father figure to me. He was fantastic. I've got stories for days. I'm sure.
What's one thing that people might not expect that you learned from him?
Oh man, interesting story. I remember we went to Cincinnati. We were in New York. He was sitting per designation of the Ninth Circuit.
Yeah.
And there was some case. It was like workers' rights or something, some employment issue.
Yeah.
And the clerks, we were assigned our briefs. I remember staying up all night, a few days that week, preparing for this. And like a couple days before we were ready to leave, I give him this brief, the bench memo, is what they call it. And he probably took 15, 20 minutes and he tore it up. I mean, it was just bloody.
Yeah.
And I'm nervous because, we're about 2 days out. I'm like, how am I going to have time to rework this? Yeah. And I remember going into him and I was somewhat defensive. I said, hey, Judge, this is what the law says.
Yeah.
And he knew the law. It's interesting. You get to their level and he had already seen like the case law many, many times before.
Sure.
So we're young, fresh out of law school. We think we're explaining something.
Yeah.
And he already knew the answer that he wanted to get to. And I remember he stopped me. He said, son, listen, we're here to make the law. We don't just regurgitate and recite what's already been written. And it changed my mindset because he's saying, for the most part, the circuit level Court of Appeals is actually writing most of the law for the country.
Yeah.
Because the U.S. Supreme Court only hears certain select cases by cert, which means that's the highest level.
Yeah.
And so what he taught me then was figure out what the right answer is, and then I need you to rewrite it in a way to help me get there. And I was just so used to finding whatever precedent was and writing it and saying, Judge, this is what we have to do. So that was a big, big lesson that I learned early on.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So basically like these were gray areas that were unclear of what the law said, and then you were basically writing new law just in terms of like establishing precedent based on how the cases were ruled.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Judge was big on just justice, equal justice under the law.
Yeah.
Was sort of his thing.
Huh.
And
cool.
So he really pushed us to just think outside the box. So I learned a ton from him in that space.
That's really cool.
It was great, to sort of kick me off into where I went in terms.
Yeah, and then let's talk about that. So you were at Miller Canfield doing a lot of bond work, right? What was that like?
So I spent the first year and a half trying my hand in litigation. I was doing tort litigation. Really sucked. It was terrible. And I had a mentor who was in the firm, who was in the public finance group, asked me if I'd be interested in doing some public finance. I liked politics. I liked, government. I liked numbers. I had a business degree. Yeah. And just sort of, I took a shot at it and actually fell in love with it. So.
What's a bond attorney do?
Yeah. So bond attorneys are, frankly, they're counsel and they provide an opinion to investors. If you look at the history of municipal finance, think about the railroad bond programs. Historically, this country, we were selling bonds. Issuers or municipalities were selling bonds, and they had the concept, if you build it, they will come. Yep. And a lot of these railroad opportunities did not produce, the development that they thought.
Just from my understanding, was the initial municipal bond written in the United States? Was it for a railroad?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't quote me on it. I'm sure folks at Miller Canfield may know. But the concept was that when the development or the revenues to support the debt didn't materialize, municipalities would just declare, that it's defeased, or they change the terms to meet the standards because they're government. What are you going to do? Right. Right. And so then the federal government, the SEC, and the U.S. government decided we need to regulate this for the purpose of protecting, credit in general. Yeah. And so they put some things in place, one of which is that you have to have independent bond counsel to advise on the feasibility of the deal, right? And whether it meets it's compliant with tax laws. Okay. And then also you play a role in ensuring that the disclosure and other requirements, regulatory requirements, to ensure that the deal is arbitrary and sufficient. Meets expectations.
From a legal perspective, you're providing that counsel to the investors, who I'm assuming are doing their own analysis of the terms themselves, right? And who just educate us a bit, like the investors, who are those people?
Yeah, so investors are institutional funds who are investing in securities. So they're purchasing the bond in exchange for the right to receive interest and principal repayment in the future. Yep. And you're also advising the issuer. And so we are independent, but in some regards, you're really not, because you're helping to structure the deal in a way, and you're negotiating terms to ensure that the municipality doesn't get in trouble later on down the road. Got it. And make sure they're meeting all their requirements.
What would be a couple of cases historically that have tripped up a municipality or somebody financing one of these bonds, like that would get them in trouble?
So I remember the city of Detroit many years ago did some certificates of participation. They weren't. There's a gray area in public finance, and if the security is not necessarily expressly authorized by law, we took some liberties, and the issuer may take some liberties in terms of how they interpret what they're permitted to do, and create instruments of security to finance certain deals. Well, ultimately, when that security was determined not to be sufficient, there were some challenges that they had to do to correct that issue. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. And in this case, it's this might be obvious, but just so I'm on the same page. Yep. What would be like is there an example bond issuance that comes to mind that was like a particularly noteworthy one? It's like they're not a railroad example, but
none that I can think of. We haven't certainly advised on an issue that ultimately did not turn out to be legal. Yeah. Right. But for example, there are also some concerns as to whether the project or the purpose of the issue is a public or a private purpose. Yeah. Right. And so you have private activity tests and other things where you have to consider. And oftentimes, for example, you think about a stadium. Yep. Right. Where municipality could argue or suggest that this stadium is for a public purpose.
Right.
But ultimately, a private operator and owner is receiving the benefit, and they're making a profit.
Yeah.
So there's some tests that you have to do to make sure that you separate the portion that the municipality is responsible for versus what the private operator is seeking funding for.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And does that, I'm just trying to connect the dots in there with like how a capital, like, because, you know, a city will put forth a capital improvement plan.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense like of a city's capital improvement plan? How much of that would necessarily be bond driven? It might be possible that none of it's bond driven, right?
Yeah. Well, cities can only borrow up to certain limits. The Home Rule City Act governs and sets a cap in terms of a portion of what percentage of their debt, matches the budget.
So like
city budget.
Debt payments as a percentage of budget can't be greater than whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
is that a state law or federal law?
So Home Rule City Act is a state law.
Okay.
Right. But it also provides that's set forth in the charter, the city charter.
Okay.
So, and then also we have to, I'm sorry, I want to make sure I'm answering.
Yeah, that was great. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right.
So now when you're issuing bonds at Miller Canfield, or I guess representing the investors, making sure that the entity, the government entity is designing it in a way that works for them long term as well. You're playing kind of an intermediary role there. Mm-hmm. What happens next? So like you go through, you do this diligence, the bond gets financed. Then what? Then the cash comes in. How does the city know when to like get the cash? Because then the investor, I think, then syndicates it, right, to a bunch of their investors, but they put up the initial payment. I just like, if you could maybe walk through.
Yeah, I mean, this guy has 3 years to spend proceeds, which is also why we think about timing.
Yeah.
Right, because you can't fund a project before it's ripe.
Okay.
Right, and so, or they may be trying to fund a project that maybe they've already had some expenditures that they want to reimburse themselves for.
Sure.
And so there's this period you have to have reimbursement agreements and make sure that you don't go back too far to try to capture funds that aren't eligible.
Okay.
But bottom line, yes, they have about a 3-year window to spend those proceeds, and there's a plan, right? And then obviously there are some requirements that if you don't meet that spend down requirement, then you have to repay some of that interest that you've earned to the IRS.
So, like, I'm just thinking about, I don't know if you're familiar with the Ann Arbor Public Schools bond, but it was I think it was $1 billion bond to, refurbish and even build a bunch of new schools, like the actual buildings.
Sure.
And I'm pretty sure that, like, that's longer than 3 years. So is there, the deployment of the capital that is, right? I don't think they're going to, like, deploy all $1 billion in the next 3 years. So is that a state?
Well, it just depends. So it could be that they authorized $1 billion, right? But they don't sell. They sell them in tranches.
Got it.
Right, or series.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, interesting. So you spent 13 years doing municipal bond work.
Yeah.
Any kind of like stories that like you wish when you look back on that time there, like what was the most exciting or interesting thing that you learned?
Well, toward the end of my tenure at Miller Canfield, we were entering a phase in Michigan, municipal finance, where there was a lot of distressed communities.
This is late 2000s-ish.
Yeah. Mid 2000s. Yeah. Late 2010s.
Yeah.
And so we spent a significant amount of time at the forefront of advising what was emerging, which was emergency managers.
Yeah.
At the time when Detroit in particular began to experience some financial pressures, there were cash flow issues and challenges. And so as we talk about our role as bond counsel, often what you're doing is you have to sell the credit, right, to the market. And so you're taking their financial statements and disclosure documents, you put them together, and you have to go to the market and explain why the city is investment grade, all right, and secure investment.
Yeah.
And ultimately it became more challenging to explain it.
Yeah,
right?
I bet.
And then also there are the difference between municipalities and, say, the private sector is that in the corporate space, you can do things as long as the law doesn't prevent you or prohibit.
Yep.
In the public sector space, you can only do what the law expressly provides.
Okay. I didn't realize that.
And so there are limited purposes and specific statutes that provide for the things that you can finance.
Got it.
And so when you're talking about cash flow or deficit financing,
Yeah.
there are very limited tools. And again, the goal, it should be that it's temporary,
Yeah.
right? With the idea that your revenue projections will suggest that you, at some point, will begin to rebalance,
Yeah.
right? And so this is just sort of a temporary bridge to help you get there. But ultimately what you find is, or what we were finding in those years, is that municipalities were borrowing, but then they would we call it like scoop and chuck, right? They'd refinance and borrow against the debt that's outstanding, push it longer.
Yeah.
They weren't fixing
the under
structural issues. And then oftentimes I would say, government is interesting in that there are limited options in terms of generating revenues, right? You have fees, fines, taxes.
Yeah.
There are limitations on how much you can raise taxes.
Yeah.
And yet expenditures there are constant pressures, right, on how to increase expenditures. And so, or there are these events that are unplanned for. There's either, you think about the city of Flint, there may be an unexpected crisis that arises because of some infrastructure challenge that was unplanned for. Or I remember we had a very interesting deal for the city of Ecorse where the mayor and the city treasurer stole some money. Yeah. Right. They were convicted, and it was conceded by the city, the emergency manager who's put in place to resolve that issue, that they took that money, but the dollars that were collected by the city were owed to the school district. And so the city, as the tax collection entity, collected these dollars, right, but didn't remit the funds because they were misappropriated. Right.
And once that money's gone, how do you fix that?
Well, that was the issue. So under state law, the only real source to address issues where the city is liable for something that it can't afford to pay out of its general fund is the Revised Judicature Act, or the Judgment Levy Act. So you can issue judgment levy bonds. It's a one-time bond that you issue in response to a court order. And then you issue the debt, right? I'm sorry, you don't issue the debt, you levy the tax. It's a tax, judgment levy tax. And you take the proceeds from the tax revenues and then you pay the judgment. But in this case, the amount that the city owed, let's just say it was $10 million, right? Against a budget that was $20 million.
Yeah, right. A lot. Yeah.
They couldn't afford to levy that on a population that I think had stagnated. It probably was it was a bedroom community, a lot of seniors, fixed income. And so at the time, the emergency manager approached us and said, we don't know what to do, right? And so there was no statute that would allow us to spread the payments over a period of time. There was only the Revised Judicature Act, which is a one-time levy. Yeah. So what we did was we negotiated with the state. We brought in all of the creditors, the state of Michigan, the school districts, and
anyone who was owed money.
Anyone who's owed money. We entered into a stipulation, right, and consent judgment where we had the city admit that they owed the amount, and then we asked the court to order the city to repay the debt in installments that matched the bond debt service schedule. Okay. So that was sort of a creative way where we're saying, we know the law doesn't say it, but I don't think anyone can argue that if a judge orders you to do something, you have to comply with the court order.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah.
And how long did that take to play out end to end?
Well, that was one of those things where, boy, probably took us 4 months, 5 months.
Oh, that's way faster than what I would have thought. I mean,
sometimes you have to move fast.
Yeah. Because people are owed money and it's,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the school districts depend on those tax revenues for operating purposes, right? The state depends on it for its budget.
Yeah.
So,
wow. That's fascinating,
so
man.
pretty
I bet you see so many different angles of it, from a legal point of view, from a finance point of view, from a constituent point of view. It's fascinating. So coming out of the Miller Canfield experience, next step was Detroit Public Schools, right? Yeah. So talk to us about the segue.
So Detroit Public Schools was one of my clients. Yeah. And I was a little bit frustrated with my role as counsel. Yeah. We talked about this a little bit. Yeah. I think attorneys are viewed as, we are problem solvers, but for the most part, we advised and help our clients avoid risk, right? Or minimize risk. But I also was frustrated because after a while you become an expert at reviewing financial statements. And so you can start to identify where the pressure points are.
Yeah.
And so in addition to the bond work, we would also advise them on just some very basic or structural things that they could do, within the law to kind of fix and address some of the issues. And I was frustrated, growing increasingly frustrated, that they weren't acting on or taking my advice.
Mm-hmm.
And from my perspective, I always assumed, government's inefficient, or they're indecisive, they can't make decisions. And I really wanted to go in on inside and actually play a role in fixing what I thought would
Amen to that.
And I thought, hey, that'd be fun to do.
Yeah.
Smart guy. I figured I had a ton of ideas to try to help restructure.
And it matters. It helps people.
Absolutely. And so I took a shot.
Yeah.
And opportunity was presented to me by the emergency manager that had just been appointed by the governor.
Mm-hmm.
And he offered me his chief deputy role. I would be his right hand. And so I thought that would be great because I had the opportunity to work on finance, but also learn how government operates. And that was important, right? Because I felt that was the missing link in terms of my evolution as a professional.
Yeah.
To not just have to understand the legal side of things, but also understand what are the issues.
The operating realities.
The operating realities, yeah.
Yeah.
That challenge some of these decisions that need to be made.
So there's a ton of really interesting things about the DPS experience, but one thing that I'm particularly curious about is, you'd mentioned there were some things when you were on the attorney side that recommendations you were making for how they could, better manage their finances that weren't being listened to or acted upon. And then, like you said, you wanted to get the operating experience. So after having the operating experience, looking back on those recommendations you were making, how do you think about them? Were they dead on, or did you learn something that maybe changed your mind?
I think so. What I learned is there's also a political price to pay, right? And you have to be able to communicate the challenges and the things that you're doing. And oftentimes, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
It's very challenging, very hard for an elected official to stand in front of folks, for example, and we're closing school buildings. Economically, from a financial perspective, it made sense.
Yeah.
Because we would say this building, from an operational standpoint, it's a financial decision.
Right.
It's black and white.
Yep.
But you have an alumni association. They're saying you're closing the fabled Cody High School.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
You're closing historical landmark.
Yeah.
This is personal to us.
Kids are going to be on buses longer now. All
those things.
Yeah.
And you're insensitive. Right?
Yep.
And no one believes. Here's the other thing. I think the greatest challenge in government is trust. Both building trust, right, maintaining trust, and also granting, right, or giving trust. The community doesn't trust. It's just an inherent nature of the beast. I just don't think the community, due to a variety of factors, trusts the information that they receive.
Yeah.
Right. And
that was true even back then. I'm super true now.
Absolutely.
It was true back then.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you can say these things are happening and go, we don't believe you. Or they'll say, there's money available.
Yeah. Fix it. Something you're not telling us.
The common refrain is the state's got it. Just because they just think there's an empty pot, an empty bucket filled with money that just pours out and covers any issues that
under backstopping everything.
That's right.
And are they not? Like, there's got to be cases where they're not, right?
Well, it's a balancing act because every dollar that the state allocates to a distressed issue is taken from somewhere else.
Yep.
If you think about the plan of adjustment that was ultimately agreed to support Detroit Public Schools, the legislature had to commit to covering the operating expenses, right? So that we could dedicate the tax dollars that the electors authorized to pay off the legacy debt.
Yeah.
Well, where's that money come from? It comes from other communities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to the school closure thing, knowing what you know now about the political costs and things like that, what's the takeaway there? Like, is it that you need an elected leader who's willing to lose the next election to do the right thing?
That's tough.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can give you an answer that would satisfy everyone that's watching or listening.
Yeah.
I would just say it's tough.
Yeah.
Emergency managers had the ability to make some tough choices.
Yeah.
And some would argue that was necessary. Others would say they're missing the accountability,
Yeah.
right, that would come from being an elected official.
Yeah.
So I'm not here to suggest that one decision was greater than another.
Yeah.
But you got to pull the trigger. Ultimately, those costs don't go away.
Right.
And that's the tough part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So moving on, there were, I think during your tenure, if I'm not mistaken, there were a few different emergency managers for DPS.
Yes.
Walk us through that. Like what changed? How did the priorities evolve through the changes in leadership, or did they not?
The priorities didn't evolve. The law was evolving because when I was at Miller Canfield, we were working off Public Act 72.
Okay.
The community had some concerns or expressed some frustrations with how that law was written because it felt it gave too much power and authority to the emergency managers. And so then Public Act 4, which was for an interim period, the new legislation was put in place to kind of address some of their concerns. And then PA 236 was the third iteration, and that one was significantly more limited in that it placed time parameter restrictions or limitations on emergency matters. So it then created a system where we had to go through a review process. There were multiple stakeholders involved.
Yeah.
And then the emergency manager only had a window of 18 months to address those fiscal issues. And so it just changed.
Before it necessarily was handed back over to whom? To an elected?
Well, that's a good question. In theory, the local elected body is authorized by statute they can vote to remove the emergency manager.
Okay.
What happens after that, whether another decision is made, ultimately would have been on a case-by-case basis. But it just put a lot of pressure on whoever that person was in place as an emergency manager to take different approaches and make different decisions that maybe someone who had a sense that they had more time might take a more graduated approach.
Right. You had to get in quick and make change.
It's a balancing act, right? Because you're also balancing that against the perception that emergency manager is staying too long.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
They didn't have the limitations that PA 436 placed on them ultimately. And so they would say, well, wait, this emergency manager is just sitting.
Right.
And frankly, they aren't doing anything better than what our elected leaders would be doing. Yeah. That was the argument.
Well, and I imagine probably some elected officials, if they can point to the stuff that the emergency manager is doing that might be necessary, they might want that person to finish some of the job before they get elected, right? So that they're not having to deal with these skeletons that are in the closet.
Certainly, I think there were some elected leaders who were able to use some of the decisions by the emergency manager to their advantage.
So if you take a step back from that time at DPS, and let's assume now you're running, you're superintendent of a school district.
So that was my next move. I moved from there and I became emergency manager for another small school district, which is essentially superintendent CEO. Yeah.
And so, but I guess as an elected, what, let me take that step. What did you do? Like, what were some of the first things that you would look at right-sizing any school district?
I'm glad you asked that because when I was appointed, I actually was operating under the latest edition of the emergency manager statute, the PA 436. And so I did have an 18-month window restriction.
Yeah.
So I had to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
First thing I did was...
And by the way, you view that as a good thing. So you could just get going.
I
give
agree.
You power. Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
And I think it's a valid point, right? You don't want someone who's not elected or accountable to the people sitting in that seat. It should be for a temporary purpose.
Yep.
And it should be for a specific purpose.
Yep.
And then get out of the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the first thing is to get a handle on what's going on.
Yep.
All right. And so you start with the financial statements, of course. You try to identify, first of all, that the information that you're reviewing is accurate.
Okay.
That's it's more challenging than you think. Because
Ann Arbor had this issue.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you go into a situation where there's been a significant amount of turnover, and changing in administration, there's a lack of capacity in government. Particularly smaller communities, if you lose that chief financial officer, it's hard to replace them.
Totally.
Right away. Imagine being in the UP or in some small rural community and you lose your chief financial officer. And there's not another replacement for that's sufficiently trained
Right.
within 100 miles.
Totally.
And so you get, you get you see books that may or may not be accurate. So I had to validate or verify. So I brought in a firm to help assess and give me an assessment. I'm not an accountant, I'm an attorney, I understand finance, but I wanted to make sure in accordance with GASB and GAAP principles that we understood how much we had in the bank, because that helps us identify what the runway is and how much time we had.
Yeah. Is that an obvious question to answer? Because there's a lot of different accounts, right? You got to go boom, boom, boom through all of them.
Absolutely.
So that's
you have your general fund, which is the primary operating fund, but then there are other funds that have a specific purpose by statute. And oftentimes what you'll find is that though there's some interfund transfers, because when it gets tight, municipality will just borrow from one fund, move it to the other, with the idea that they're going to pay it back, and then sometimes they don't. So you have to sort through how much money has been reallocated, from a fund that it shouldn't have been. That becomes part of your deficit stack, right? In terms of the deficit you have to eliminate.
One fund owing another fund is part of the deficit.
Absolutely. It's not just creditors. It's like you also have to repay the fund that you borrowed against.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so you get a proper accounting of what cash is, of what your debts are, and what? Cash flow?
Cash flow is the other, right? How much cash do we have to address the deficit? And often that's where you'll find the reason why emergency managers are in place, because ultimately you find in insolvency, you don't have enough cash to address the deficit. And so then you have to get creative. All right. What are the things that we can do? First thing I did was I went in and I said, let's plug the hole, because there were some expenditures that were just bleeding, right? And no one understood the extent of the damage that it was causing and what needed to be done to address the issues. They were just it's like leaving your water hose on, it's running. So while I'm trying to assess how much, of the deficit, it's continuing to grow because we hadn't addressed the issues. And so the first thing is to plug the hole so that you don't have any new unidentified or unplanned activities that are stressing the budget.
So where are we now? Step one. Step two, how do we stop any new stresses from coming in and creating an even worse situation?
That's right.
Right?
Yep. And you have to look across all your asset classes, right? So you have personnel. Right? Is there a more efficient way we can do this? Secondly is building, O&M, right? Deferred maintenance. That it creates an issue in the future, but also there may be some things that are resulting from the fact that you haven't addressed some maintenance issues. That
further increase operating expenses.
Absolutely. 100%. And then once we identified where the gaps were and where these expenses are, then you want to make sure that you have maximized all your revenue generating sources. For schools, that's tough. They don't have any. Cities is a lot easier. You can identify, maybe there's new fees, fines, there are different things that you can do. For schools, they're locked into state aid.
Grants, basically.
Grants and state aid. I mean, foundation allowance, which is tied directly to enrollment. And the challenge with schools, unfortunately, is that the revenues are also tied, the loss of revenues impact performance, which leads to a decline in enrollment. So it's cyclical. Right. So now you have this drain where you're losing students, which is reducing the amount of money you have to address the deficit that you already have. So it's just it's a huge issue. Big challenge.
Downward cycle. Is there so for districts that are in that cycle, how have people, in your view, how have people broken out of it?
Well, you isolate the deficit, right? And you try to identify revenue streams that you can dedicate to paying that down while maintaining operations. In the case of Detroit Public Schools, Highland Park, Muskegon Heights, a lot of these communities that had emergency managers, we were creative. The state was very creative in creating structures that allowed those school districts to take advantage of the tax revenues that traditionally would be used for operating purposes and apply them entirely to the debt. So in the case of Detroit Public Schools, we created DPSCD, right? New entity, which by state law was entitled to receive its foundation allowance or its state aid directly from state aid fund that the state has established for local communities, as opposed to relying on its 18 mills operating levy that it traditionally had relied on.
Yeah.
And then the old co, right? So DPSCD is new co.
Yep.
Old co remained for the sole purpose of paying debt service.
Debt down.
And so it captured and collected all of those. And so that allowed us to isolate that revenue to address the deficit, the debt. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, this happens in private companies too.
Private companies all the time. That's right. In the case of smaller communities, like Highland Park, Muskegon Heights, similar old co, new co, but we use the charter school structure or model to reach the same result. So charter schools, of course, don't have taxing authority and don't rely on or depend on a local share as a portion of their foundation allowance. They are paid out of the state aid fund directly. And so by taking all of the students that were in the public system and creating a charter system that the public school, local education authority authorized, take all the students, put them under the authority of the charter. The local district can use all its tax revenues, pay its debt, and the charter, which is performing essentially the same functions as the elected body, provides the educational services.
So
that's imperfect also. I mean, there are flaws, there are challenges and issues.
Sure. It's an insanely difficult situation. I'm sure there's got to be sacrifices. You made the point about like trying to find efficiencies in the budget and things like this when after you get a proper accounting of what cash is, you're looking at where you can be more efficient. What are some things that are common, issues that present themselves where there's opportunity to be more efficient?
I mean, this is where the private sector comes in. I mean, when you come in as a receiver or emergency manager, I mean, first thing you know is there a more efficient way to do things? Without, of course, losing the accountability. I mean, that's key. The decisions have to be made in a way that the community and the residents and the people who are beneficiaries or recipients of the services, because government is created for the sole purpose of providing services to people. It's not like the private sector where the goal is just to make money. And so that accountability has to be there. But you want to balance it against, is there a more efficient way to do this? Where you may have, and this is where there's been some concerns, right? You may have dedicated personnel where they're part of a union, and there's some costs associated with that. Is it more efficient to do it using the private sector? Not advocating one or the other, just sharing it. It's
a trade-off.
It's just a trade-off, and those are decisions that you make. You look at, are there ways to monetize some services or things that are being provided to generate revenues outside of, say, the district? For example, if the district has a facility that is more capable of providing, say, special education or special needs services to other districts, maybe you look at entering some intergovernmental agreements where you can generate revenues, where other districts would pay the district to provide those services. You look at transportation costs, you look at food costs, where you purchasing or acquiring your meals, right? What dollars are being used to
how have you thought about knowing that you're getting good pricing from your vendors and all the things?
Well, state law requires competitive bids at the government level, which is one way to do it. I think that's probably the most effective. State law doesn't necessarily require lowest, it's most responsible. And so there's some give there. But again, we talk about trust and we talk about accountability. I think as most elected leaders are going to look for the lowest price. It's lowest responsible. You don't want to have a contractor come in and just underbid everyone, but
can't do the work.
They can't do the work.
So after you left Highland Park schools, you I think took a role at the state, right?
So I still have my law practice. I became of counsel with another law firm because it allowed me to work on some small scale municipal finance deals. But also, I became a contractor for Treasury. In the latter years of the emergency manager period, it was a little disfavored to appoint emergency managers. Not a little disfavored. We know it was disfavored. It was just
largely because of the Flint issue. Was that where
just in general? I think there was some fatigue also in emergency manager structure. Some argued that the state was running out of folks that were even willing to take those positions.
Right.
I don't know if that's true or not, but certainly get it. I understand.
Yeah.
It made sense. And so Treasury was looking for ways to support and partner with the local communities and what we now call our trusted partner model.
Okay.
Because there are resources that we can dedicate to assist, and we essentially reimburse communities when they hire professionals to do the things that they may not have the capacity to do.
Gotcha.
And so I slotted into that role to where I would receive a call from a community that says, hey, we just don't know how to do this, and we don't have the people to do it. Can you help us? And then Treasury would reimburse them for my.
And what were some of the, maybe you don't have to name names, but what were the examples of what you'd be called in to help with?
Yeah, they might need to restructure some of their debt.
Yeah.
They might need to identify new revenue sources. There may need to be, they call it
expense reductions or something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of helping them navigate through, because they also have legal concerns, right? So the benefit that I had is that by understanding what public laws, were applicable to various circumstances, I was able to assure them, or at least help them navigate through decisions that ultimately they needed to make.
Yeah.
And then just my experience in being in all of those different roles, I understood that the most important thing was to empower, the elected body. Because again, this wasn't an EM scenario. This was me engaged or contracted by the local unit of government.
Right.
And I view my role very differently. I didn't take a personal stake in the ultimate resolution. There are things that I wanted to happen a certain way.
Sure.
But ultimately, I felt like my goal or my objective and my purpose was to educate them so that they can make the most responsible decisions.
Were there, just to understand how you got pulled in, were there like financial metrics that these cities were reporting to the state that once they hit this number on a spreadsheet somewhere that, now we got to call Kevin? Like, how's that work?
Absolutely. So there's what we now call an early warning program, or there's a statute that sets forth some triggers. If you notice declining fund balances over consecutive years, debt service coverage ratios are shrinking.
But these are formulaic things. They're not. There's no judgment involved.
That's right.
Okay.
Fund balance deficits.
Yep.
Right. In various accounts or general fund deficits.
Yeah.
Loss of tax base. A lot of different things.
And what's the mindset like in general, if there even is a generalization there of a leader of a town or city that is in those sort of conditions? I'm assuming that they're, prior to meeting those financial metrics, they knew that they were heading toward it, and so they're trying to make changes that would prevent it from happening. What do you find that they've tried to do before? And then, like, what were some of the things that maybe they were pushing off because they were, like, politically unfavorable? You know what I mean? Do you find any patterns there? Yeah, I think there's a consistent pattern that isn't easy to address. It's part of democracy. It's convincing the democratic process. Yeah. Convincing multiple people, let's say your city council, to agree and to approve an action that, one, whether that be the chief financial officer, the mayor, others are recommending as a solution. And that is probably painful.
It's painful. Yeah. And you've seen it reflected in the federal budget process. Yeah. There are no two minds that may agree on the same thing. Yeah. And so delay is no respecter of persons. Mm-hmm. And so the longer you disagree, you can call it government shutdown, you can call it a delayed decision. Yeah. The problem doesn't go away. Right. Right. And so I would suggest that there's not a lack of ideas. Mm-hmm. It's a lack of execution or ability to execute that stops a lot of these things.
What do you think is the central point there? Is it
elected leaders?
Is it leadership?
No, I mean, they're risk averse. Yeah. Right. it's hard to make tough decisions, particularly when you get in these small communities.
Yeah.
If you think about a small town, let's say there's 5,000 people, half of them went to high school together or grew up together,
Totally.
right?
They all
And
know
you're
each other.
saying, I need to lay off the DPW director.
Yeah.
And that's your friend who you,
Right.
or the fire chief, I need to reduce staff and, I need to reduce the deputy chief's role to X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And at the last minute, someone may come in and say, you can't do that.
Yep.
And it's just hard.
Totally.
Yeah.
Is that what's the escape out of that? Do you think is it economic growth? Like at the state level, I feel like in many ways Michigan has been under pressure a lot over the last number of decades for a variety of reasons. One of which is competition in the auto industry.
That's tough. I mean, if I had an answer, I'd wave my magic wand.
Yeah, you'd be,
inside.
You'd have solved it by now.
That's right.
Yeah.
There are constant budget pressures because there are rising costs.
Yeah.
And when it comes to government, it frankly only comes down to a few things. It's either labor, right?
Yeah.
Facilities, right? Maybe pension obligations.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Healthcare costs.
Yeah.
But there's constant pressures.
Yeah. And I
budgets.
was speaking with someone a few months back, and they mentioned something about how, the accounting of pensions. There's been some changes over time with how GASB looks at those things. Maybe this is a way to ask the question, like how often do you find that the financial picture that the leadership believes is true about the entity, whether it's a school district or a city or a county, how often do you find that if you were to go look at the books, like what's true is actually different from what's represented, or what they think is true? Is that
not often?
Not often.
Elected leaders are very in tune and astute, and they understand the issues.
And they're getting audits every year.
They're getting audits every year, right? And they have competent staff and professionals. It's a capacity issue, I think.
Okay.
Well, more than anything else.
Capacity meaning what?
To address the issues.
Okay.
Identifying the issue is, I'm not going to say it's easy, but that's the first step.
Yeah.
Right.
But square that with like step one for being an EM was make sure the books are right.
Well, and also make the tough decisions because you don't need a vote.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really what it comes down to. For example, if you take your public infrastructures, most of our aging public infrastructures in our large cities or even in our other suburban communities, after a certain point, you have to, there's a covenant that you have to maintain rates at a level that will sustain operations. Well, imagine if there's disinvestment, there's migration of people, so you have less ratepayers.
Yep.
You're covering more territory to service less households or businesses, right? And so what does maintaining rates to meet operational expenses mean? You have to increase the rates that you charge for those who are left remaining.
Right.
That's a tough choice.
Yeah, this is one of the spiral things you were talking about.
It's one of those things where, if I'm mayor or council member, I'm going to say enough is enough. I am not going to raise rates on my residents.
So one of the things I'm curious your take on is, with Pursuit, we're trying to make it so that, that vendors who can deliver a quality service at a great price to a public institution, that they have the tools and the wherewithal to know where those opportunities are. And so when we talk about like the financial condition of a city, maybe put yourself in the shoes of a vendor who's involved with, some of the big line items that you talked about there. What advice would you have for someone who's a contractor about would you advise that the contractors understand the financial position of the places? Because maybe one argument might be if a community is in not an amazing financial position, they might be willing to change up who the vendor is for X, Y, Z, right? If they can get a better price. I don't know. What do you think that's?
It's also about trust because, again, and we go back to delivery of service.
Yep.
Oftentimes the savings may not match the expectation of the community.
Right.
They may say, I don't want you to outsource our security or police and fire, or I don't want you to outsource, public lighting. Because I don't trust that they're going to deliver services the way, or that if they don't deliver services, I won't be able to hold them accountable.
Right. There's no report.
Because they don't report directly or are accountable directly to our elected leaders.
Right.
And so my advice, frankly, is to address the trust issue above all else, because ultimately the finances speak for themselves.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of ensuring that the community and the elected leaders, those who are accountable to the community, believe and understand why what you're suggesting is true.
So what do you think, like, how do you build that trust?
That's tough.
I'm sure
there's no one answer to it, particularly in small communities. I believe that you have to identify third-party validators within those communities.
So it's not just you carrying the flag. It's you've got other people that are saying, this is true. This is an issue. We got to deal with it. Yeah. Okay.
And those who maybe are specialists in that area, who that local leader already has an established trust relationship with, who can sort of validate some of the things that the vendor is proposing.
And that might be who? Like an accounting firm that they have worked with in the past? Or?
It could be an accounting firm that they've worked with in the past. It could be, a DPW director who has been there many years and has seen a lot of things.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So now talk to us a little bit about your role at the state. So you went from, like, you had a small practice, or you had your own practice where you were called in for these kind of so it sounds like ad hoc issues. Now you have a formal role as deputy
state treasurer. Rachel Eubanks called me. We had worked on together in the municipal finance space, and she was at an underwriter, and I was bond counsel. And she asked if I'd be interested in joining her administration, right, at the start of the governor's second term.
Yep.
And she would give me oversight of state and local finance. So it was attractive to me because I had done a lot localized.
Yeah.
But the opportunity was, I think, too big to pass up. It was one where I could take a bird's eye view of the entire state and apply a lot of the experiences and lessons that I learned to try to address, from a policy perspective, and advise, right, the governor's office through the treasurer and also the legislature on policy decisions that they could make in advance, right, that could somehow help, but also have an opportunity to see and experience other things other than just a one-off.
Yeah.
And maybe figuring out how we can put together systems, right, to help address a lot of those things.
I want to come back to the systems point, but just generally, what are some of the things that accomplishments you're most proud of?
Mostly that's been firefighting. I'm most proud of the deal that we just structured and negotiated to help address a 20-year litigation between GLWA and the city of Highland Park over the infrastructure challenge that we just discussed.
Yeah.
Highland Park was unable to maintain its obligations.
GLWA is Great Lakes Water Authority?
That's right.
Yeah.
To the authority based on the rates that it was charging. They had, in addition to that, their infrastructure was certainly declining.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the ability to address that. We had to go in and negotiate, but also not just to get those two parties to agree on what that amount is, but to resolve it, we had to advocate for and secure funding to rebuild the system and set them on a new path. Some of the bigger issues on that project was they weren't metering the water use, the water and sewer usage. And so these were just guesstimates, and they were arguing over what was right and what was wrong. So some of the things we had to do was fund the installation of meters.
Yeah.
And
how much did that cost?
Well, the whole project is $110 million.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's the area where, look, a lot of times it is a matter of money.
Yeah.
It says, okay.
Yeah.
The state was in a very good, fiscally, we were in a great position.
Yeah.
We were running budget surpluses. And it was important from the governor's perspective to apply those surpluses in ways that could eliminate distress, in the future.
Yeah.
Right. So of a one-time investment now to prevent that from happening in the future.
Right.
And I wish I could take credit for all these things, but it's a collaborative effort. You have the legislature, you have the governor's office, and we all talk about, the issues. If you think about the pension relief program, many years ago, let's say 5 or 6 years ago, there was a significant portion of our municipal pension programs that were underfunded.
Yep.
They did not have the ability to bring it into compliance or wherever funding goes. And so Another area where we applied some of the state surpluses is we created a pension relief program where if you were under the 70% funded threshold, City of Detroit was one of them, we were able to allocate funds that would bring your funding levels up. The goal being to reduce your ADC, your annual defined contribution that comes directly and it impacts directly your general fund.
Right.
And so I wish I could say we did a lot of technical things that were creative. We allocated surplus funds in a responsible way.
Yep.
I thought made a difference. And in addition to that, we expanded our role in the early identification of issues and the deployment of capital and resources to support professional work being done on the front end.
Yeah.
And so because we have new legislation that the legislators put in place that requires our municipalities to start submitting information a lot sooner,
Okay.
we're able to flag and identify some of these budget pressures. And then
and those things that they're submitting earlier, those are what you mentioned earlier about like declining fund balance. And
so you have your audit, but then you also have deficit elimination plans.
Okay.
You have your F-65s, which reports on your pension obligations.
Okay.
But we take all of that information and we monitor, right, the fiscal health on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
For school districts, they have what's called an early warning legislation. We don't have anything similar for the cities right now, but for the schools, there's an express legislation that talks about if you trigger some of these indicators, we then will require more frequent reporting information.
Yeah.
Right. Which then allows us to respond. In addition to just a deficit elimination plan, we may also be able to fund personnel on a temporary basis.
Okay.
Folks like me, right, who are able to come in and maybe assume on a quasi basis the responsibility of operating the finance department or the water and sewer department. DPW.
So that early warning system, I know that's for schools, but I think of the whole process you described as kind of an early warning system.
That's right.
I'm curious, like how that's evolved over the years. Like, when in the late 2000s, was there such an early warning system that existed, or is that new since then?
Yeah, it's new.
It's new since then.
Yeah. Born in part from the need. Information is king.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. The state can only react and respond as we are
to what
aware.
It knows. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oftentimes, municipalities, I won't suggest that they are reluctant to share information, but they may not have the ability to because they don't have the personnel.
Yeah.
They may not have folks that they don't have books that maybe they have confidence in that they're willing to share that information.
Yeah. And I imagine every state's different, but in Michigan, what are the things that municipalities or that public entities owe the state? You said it's like Form 65 or something?
F-65, and they're CAFRs or ACFRs, we call them.
Yeah, okay.
Audited financial statements.
So the ACFRs go to the state, and that has all the metrics that they're looking at, and then there's F-65 as well. Yeah. And is that the only source?
Those are the two main sources. There's some other reports. Yeah. I probably can't recite them all.
Sure.
My team send it to you. But
okay, but then that.
And we try not to be redundant, right? And ultimately, if we can capture the information from the financial reports,
right.
And the F-65. I mean, we're trying to reduce duplicative reporting.
Right. And if you find, so for instance, and then just so I'm clear, I think GASB sets out the standards of what goes in the ACFR, correct?
Yes.
And so, for instance, like I think one of the things that was recently added to it was subscription. Like as a debt obligation was technology subscriptions or contracts with software companies that public entities have entered into, just the same way they account for leases or things like that. So does every state, are you familiar, does every state have its own process like this where they're looking at, because ACFR is a nationwide GASB thing, right?
Yeah.
I assume
some states do not.
Okay.
I don't know what the statistics are. I mean, I haven't looked at them, but I know from some of the groups that I participated in, I was actually surprised to understand there are some states that don't require audits to be submitted at the state level at all, right? And there are some states that continue to perform audits directly themselves for the local units. That's also another area that we're looking to get involved in doing more of in the near term. Because to address the capacity issue.
Right. In some communities, there may not be the people who can do the audit at the price that you guys need it at. Is that the fundamental issue?
And it's also, again, it's workforce challenges. We're also finding, as we look at this, that there are fewer and fewer graduates who are going into public accounting or public finance they want to go to the private sector. And there are fewer firms that are interested or willing to do municipal accounting.
Why do you think that is?
I mean, economics is one of them, right? I mean, your profit margin.
Less profitable.
Less profitable, sure.
Well, I guess in this has been super insightful to hear kind of the history of your career. I've really enjoyed learning. When you kind of take a step back, like what's one thing that is maybe false today that you hope is true in 5 years as it relates to, state finances? And you could answer that
today.
Yeah. Like what's one thing that you wanted to get done, but like haven't been able to get done yet?
I don't know. There are a lot that's what I have come to realize is that we're just stewards of the time in the time that we have at the seat. And there's a lot that just can't get done, either because there's a lack of political will. There are so many different things that go into it.
Yeah, a bunch of things to kill the project, right?
My biggest frustration is that there's not enough resources to go around to address all of the issues that really need to be addressed. And that's going to be a constant balancing act and pressure on state and local governments.
I'm just curious to ask, because we deal with AI every day, and I think that's like one of the classic cases of how AI can help is like it can help you do things at scale that you couldn't do before. Do you see it having a role in?
I think it has a tremendous value. We're studying it now to see how that we can reduce redundancy, right, and create the efficiencies that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Ultimately, for government, it all comes down to budget pressures.
Yeah.
Right. Where are the ways that we can become more efficient to drive costs down?
Yeah.
And if you have an interest or a focus in that space, I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Graven, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for
really appreciate you joining.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.